And the best when you find somebody that you really enjoy working with and whom you respect, grab hold of them and don't let go, because nobody accomplishes anything great exclusively by themselves. It's often in the company of people whose skill sets make up for your own deficiencies.
Ooh, I love that. Nobody accomplishes it alone, right? We can do this together, and we're kind of all in this together. So, how early in your career did you learn that, or how did you learn that, or did somebody tell you that, or how'd that happen, Neil?
That was learned far too late. Um, we often in our careers, we're sort of out there trying to explore and trying to advance ourselves, and we don't recognize that really truly great partnerships or great partners or great bosses, they're so rare. They're so unique that when you find them, don't be in such a hurry to shed them on your way to something better. I had a boss once, Scott Gilbert. He was always taking care of me, always watching out for me in ways that I could never quite understand. He's just a very avuncular, solid guy who was very ambitious and very capable. And he was like that with his people. And, the fact that I sort of like went on to another job, I kicked myself for decades.
That's interesting. That's so interesting. So, Colin Cowherd, the sports announcer, whatever sports,
Yeah, I know.
it's jock, I guess, right? So, Cowherd says early in your career, his best advice is very similar to that, right? That you should don't chase money, chase a good boss. And
Yeah.
when you find good management, right, stick with them.
Oh,
And that's
man.
interesting. So, so you had a good boss, you left him. Did you go back to him? Have you told
Yeah,
him? Does he know he was a
I
great
did, in
boss?
fact.
What happened?
I did, in fact. He saved my behind like you cannot believe. I had, uh, I had gone to work in Hong Kong for a couple of years, and I had an arrangement with my employer in Hong Kong to come back and return to that job in the United States. But I'm not pointing any fingers, but let's just say that it didn't arrive. The opportunity didn't uh, come true in the sense that it was promised. And uh, I had just bought a house, and my wife said to me, I went and told my wife. I said, "Oh, hey, this job that they said that I was going to have. I don't. They're only going to pay me half." And in in typical spousal form, she says, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" So I'm like, oh, okay. If I was expecting any sympathy, I'm not getting it right now. So this guy who had been my former great boss, he heard through the grapevine what had happened. He didn't tell me he'd heard, but he'd heard. And he calls me up and says, "Hey, how's it going?" I said, "Well, I've been bitter." And he said, "Feel like breakfast tomorrow?" And I go, "Are you buying?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Yeah, then okay." I show up for breakfast, and he says, "Listen, I heard what happened, and I want to offer you a job. Come work for me again." And so I pulled out a napkin and I wrote down the mortgage payment that I was expecting to pay on the new house, and I passed it across the table and I said, "If you can pay me that plus $20 a month, I'm yours." and, and he goes, "I can do better than that." So that
Wow.
guy was always my lifeline and my lifesaver. And
Wow.
I really should be lighting a candle to him every day.
Wow. Yeah, novena, huh? So
Yeah.
little novena candle, right? So that's funny. So interesting. So what I'm curious though, but he took care of you and that's great, but what else was right with him? Like what else was cooking with him? Was he like super capable, or how did he, how did he work that
Yeah, he
made
didn't have
him
any flaws.
exceptional?
He didn't have any
Yeah,
flaws.
flawless. Oh, good.
I
Next
will tell you
question.
his driving energy. Um, I'm gonna editorialize. I don't think he'd admit to this, but this is how I would characterize this guy. He looks around him and he sees a universe of people, young people that were eager beavers and hard workers and, mean well and all wanted good things, from life. And then he would see occasionally that their bosses would be like riding them like mules and really not caring at all about what happened to them, using them like, like batteries and then throwing them away. And his driving impetus was, I cannot stand to watch that happen. So he would try to become more important and get bigger positions just so that he could keep them from having to work for people like that. Do you know what I mean? In
Wow.
other words, it
Yeah.
was all just so that he could run air cover for his people. And
Wow.
because of that, it was a kind of an extraordinary ambition. And I don't mean extraordinary ambition, as in, I just want to do things no other man on earth can do. It wasn't like that. It was just increased power so that I could protect people. Imagine, say, for example, that you have, let's go back to, we're all in a Native American tribe, you know, and one of the braves in particular is like extraordinarily capable and brave and powerful. Instead of using that in order to bully the rest of the tribe and be the big man, they used that to be the most protective of the, to be the most capable of protecting the tribe. Um, that would be a beloved figure in the tribe. They would make epic poems about them, after they die. And that was what he was like.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. So how long did you get to work for him? And did you ever find another boss like that?
I found never quite like that. I did find good bosses though. I got lucky. There was always something admirable, even when I didn't care for the boss that I was working for. You could always find something that was admirable about them, or something to learn. So, but I worked for that guy in particular, Scott Gilbert. I worked for him for 3 years the first time, and then the next time for like 8 years. And
Awesome.
yeah, he was very good to me. And he was good to a lot of his people. They all look. I'll tell you a short story about the art of account service that was told to me, not by him, but it characterized him perfectly. So account service in advertising is, you're working on behalf of the client and you're serving marketing people who have been, they're responsible for making sure that the brand is marketed as well as it can be. The advertising agency has the advantage of being an outsider who can see things clearly and doesn't have to get absorbed too much in the company culture, and they don't face quite the same pressures that the marketing people are under. But at the same time, the advertising people don't get to take any sort of credit for the success of the brand the way that it's almost like a family. Like if you're the lawyer for a family, you're not a member of that family. And the way that this was described to me was, they said, picture this. There is a vizier, an advisor to the king. He's a very wise person and regarded as maybe the smartest person in the kingdom. And the king comes to him and he says, I am giving you responsibility for the raising of my son. I am the king, and because I am the king, I must regard all members of this country as my children. I am responsible for everyone, not just my son. But if I am to do my duty as a king, I must raise the next king to be a great man, greater than I. I give you responsibility for this task. Now, understand that because he is to be a great man, you must discipline him and you must educate him in a way that he sometimes doesn't want to be educated. You must not tolerate this from him. However, he is the prince, and therefore you must treat him as this. And what's more, you will never be the king. Is that understood? So that he will be the king, not you. You have this one duty. Now, I will close by saying this. When I die, I would hope that my son would cry. I would hope that he would be sad. But when you die, he must weep. And that is account service.
Wow. Wow. That is a powerful picture. And that's storytelling. That's why I'm talking to you today. I watch your Instagram. I mean, you tell stories so clearly and so understandable and yet so powerful that I can't replicate this. So
I
is
appreciate that.
is you yeah, I mean, is that you learn that in advertising as an ad
Yeah.
guy or
Yeah, I mean, what happened, Phil, was that when you are on the creative side of advertising, like I was, you are consistently trying to sell your creative ideas to the people that will pay money to produce them, and it's the art of persuasion. You have to convince them that this is going to do what you say it's going to do, and what's more, you better be right, or if you're wrong, you have to be honest about, I was wrong about that, or here's what we learned from it. Um, And you could say that I got my 10,000 hours in, as Malcolm Gladwell would say.
Mhm.
Because when you give literally thousands of these kinds of presentations, after a while, it's a little bit like a stand-up comedian who's done years and years on the road. You just kind of learn what works, and you learn timing. But there's something else that you learn, especially in advertising, which is that great brands tell the truth. And because they are great brands are addicted to the truth because they have no fear of it, because the way they behave in the world is honorable and the product they make is genuine and worthwhile. It's the it's the brands that lose sight of the fact that they need to be they need to operate in the world as a human being, not as a company. People need to be able to picture you, your company, as a person. What kind of person would they be? Would they be trustworthy? Would they be loyal and helpful, friendly, courteous, or are they just in it to make money and this is about them? And the 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 great stories, the great storytelling brands offer that. Um, you'll see again and again that the great brands. Let's use Procter and Gamble as an example, or Johnson and Johnson. Procter and Gamble and Johnson and Johnson, for all of the mistakes they might have made, their heart is definitely in the right place. They are trying desperately to supply something that's a very good value to people. And Procter and Gamble's best advertising is the one where it's a love letter to the people that use the product. So I'll give you an example. They did this lovely ad for the Olympics. It was run on the Winter Olympics, and what it was is it showed a chronology of 5 different young people, all of whom were going to become Olympic athletes eventually. But they all start out falling down as little babies. Bloop, blop, boom. And the mothers are always there going, whoop, get back up. And they would pick them up and they'd go, oh, no, let's try it again. And then they show them starting to play their sport, and obviously they're terrible. The figure skater's awful, and the skier's terrible, and the hockey player can't do anything except fall down in his pads, and the snowboarder, and so on and on it goes. And they're terrible, and they're terrible, and they fall down, and they fall down. But the mother's always there to get them back up on their skates or their skis. And so it goes. And you can tell because of the chronology as this beautiful soundtrack is playing. It's just that. It's just the mothers picking them up or trying to get them to get back up. And then eventually they become quite accomplished and they're getting better and they're getting better. And now they're facing the real hard knocks, the broken leg, the check that gives you a concussion and so on. And the skater who just keeps falling and can't get it right. And through it all, the mother is there. And then eventually the music stops. And this is the moment of triumph for each of the athletes. The skier who manages to, make the jump, and the ice skater who finally lands the triple lutz, and the hockey player who scores the winning goal. And at the end of it, the music comes back on, and all of the athletes are looking for their mothers in the crowd. And all it says at the end is it goes, thanks, Mom. And the message is, your job as a mother isn't to keep them from falling. Your job is to keep them getting up. And that was so touching and lovely. And every mother that saw it couldn't help but say, P&G gets me. When I go into the supermarket, money is no object, because when love is involved, money is no object.
Wow.
You got to be pretty hardcore to say that was a beautiful commercial, but fuck P&G. Like,
Yeah, I'm
are
saving
you
30
not
cents.
human?
I'm getting a generic brand.
Yeah. So that was one of those ads that I wish I had done. I mean, like because whoever concocted that, they're a human being with a heart. And the people at Procter and Gamble that approved that ad and paid for it, they completely understand what capitalism is supposed to be. I'm supposed to provide you with a product that's going to never let you down, and that yes, it costs money, but it costs money because it saves money. And it does what I told you it would do. And when you come back to me for more, just understand, I really appreciate that we're in this relationship together.
Wow. That is
Great.
good advertising, and that's great storytelling as well there. So you got started advertising. So let's rewind to that though. I mean, were you always an ad guy? Did you do anything else?
No.
Did you start out like shoveling ice cream or something or what?
Yeah, kinda. I got out of high school, my father was convinced I wasn't gonna be, that I wouldn't hit the ground running. You know, he was, like, worried that I was too kinda just letting things happen to me and not having a sufficient, initiative, which you really need. Once you go off to school, you have to have initiative in order to make it work because you get out of a college education what you put into it. It's not just the degree is only incidental and was in his view. And so he said, "Listen, don't go to school right away." So I wound up for a year working in a honey factory of all places, where I was
Honey.
running a seamer machine. For the benefit of your audience, it was you, you'd stand on this line for a good solid 8 hours, and you'd pick up they would run this hot honey through a filter press, and then it would get spilled into a 5-pound can. You would put the can on a rotor plate, put a top on it, send it through the seamer, pull this lever, and then you had to do that and fill 200 cases a day. And you talk about repetitive stress. Um, and what happens to you is you go, wow, this is really unpleasant. I really don't like this. Um, and you're working with crews, uh, you're working with crews where you realize this is what they're doing, for their career. They're doing this kind of work. And you develop an empathy for them that you wouldn't otherwise have because, like, man, that's hard. Look, it's not skilled, quote unquote, but punching out 200 cases a day, day after day after day for essentially minimum wage, that's rough. Um, that takes a lot of spine. Or, you just kind of develop calluses. Okay, so that was my first sort of job out of high school. And then I was finally ready to go to college, and I went off to a small college, and man, I just ate it up with a spoon. Just loved it. But I was paralyzed after graduation. Uh, it was a place called Menlo College School of Business Administration. It was a little college near Stanford, and just loved it. And the teachers were fantastic. The professors were so good, and they really lit you up about whatever subject they were teaching, whether it was geology or marketing or quantitative analysis or some truly great the English the money credit and banking professor Dr. Medlin and the English professor Dr. Hutchin. God, isn't it I can remember their names to this day because they had such a profound oh, had a little
So they
data
had such a,
transmission problem there.
yeah, little profound impact. Keep going, please.
Yeah, they had such a profound impact on me because they so loved teaching. And, that was kind of a paradoxical because when I got out of school, I didn't know what I wanted to do because there were so many things you could do that were all so great. It wasn't you had all kinds of opportunities, and, what I really should have done if I'd had a brain in my head was recognize that there I was in the absolute epicenter of Silicon Valley, and I should have just thrown everything into, "Look, answer this single question, Neil, just one question. In 5 years, are these computer things gonna be less important or more important?" Like, "Well, I think they're gonna be more important." "Okay, well, you just answered the question about what you should be doing then." "Nope, I'm gonna go into lumber." "What?" Yeah, I wound up working on a lumber yard in South Central LA for another, like, 4 years, like a doofus, and, that again, the dividend certainly wasn't money. But the dividend was a respect for working people, that these were hardworking, sincere, smart people who weren't in investment banking and weren't in marketing and weren't fancy, but were stalwart and intrepid and awesome. And, I learned humility in a way that it informs what I do now. In the stories that I tell, Phil, generally speaking, they're a celebration of the fact that we're all in this together and don't go around thinking you've got you've got more of whatever makes a human being than somebody else. It's not like that out there. Have a little respect, have a little courtesy for your fellow man, because we're all on a journey. And if there's anything that drives me out of my mind, it's when somebody who makes a lot of money looks down their noses at people who don't make a lot of money because they think that their money makes them a superior human.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it certainly entitles you to things, but it doesn't make you a better person.
Mm, not at all. Not at all. So that's so that's so interesting to hear that story about where your origin story and how then you moved. So you spent that time, and then what was like advertising like? You said you did 25 years as an ad guy. How did that start? I mean, 25 is it like 25 years ago. I think about that. I mean, what that was right around, I don't know, right. What about the time of the iPhone came out?
No, God, no, this was well before this. My leaving lumber, I won't go into it. It's a long story and it's interesting, but it takes too long to describe.
Okay.
But I left the lumber business and I just had to go. And I, I called everybody that I knew and I said, "Hey, I just quit my job. I need a new job. You got anything for me?" And the first thing that came up was as an assistant account executive at the agency where I found that great boss. And
Oh.
And that was the secret, was because he was just such a great boss. He opened doors for me, and I wound up going from being an assistant account executive, later transferring over to the creative side of the business where I would write ads and then try to pitch them. And so you could say it was accidental, although I really enjoyed it. And so it was just a happy, as stupid a move as lumber was for me, it was equally brilliant in the opposite thing, that I just lucked into working for a good dude
Yeah.
in
Well,
advertising.
yeah, but lessons learned are invaluable, right? Lessons learned, humility is a big one. If you'd have popped right
Yeah.
into advertising, spewing out brilliant stuff, you'd have maybe never found that.
Yeah, well, I've been humbled quite a few times. I went off to Hong Kong thinking I was a big shot and I knew everything about how to do this business, and boy, I was so full of myself. And man, I learned everything I didn't know, about advertising and people. And you know, uh, when you go over, Hong Kong is not really regarded by Westerners as China, but it is. It really is. And my I was completely at sea, so to speak. I was out of my element and out of my depth. And there's a wonderful phrase that they have over there, which is, when the Americans show up, they have all the money and we know how things work. And when they leave, we have all the money and they know how things work. And that was my experience. Is, wow, you're about to find out what a deficient human being you are, and how, for all of your ego, you're about to discover what a tiny little lint you are. And you could say that was valuable, but that cost me 3 years after that of confidence. Like,
Ooh.
Phil, if you don't have confidence, you're kind of screwed, because you won't admit that you know what's right anymore because you're not sure. Like, it's like being socially awkward. I feel quite bad for somebody who's socially awkward because they're not sure whether this is going to be interpreted the way they mean it. And it's a very uncomfortable place to exist, where your best gestures, your most well-meaning gestures, are misinterpreted. And that's how it was over in China, which is, I think this is going to be understood. Oops, nope, it wasn't. And you find out years later, I discovered that people were doing me courtesies that I was completely unaware of. They were helping me in ways they would never tell me, because it was considered unseemly to be overly friendly. And if I had any conscience, I'd go back and do them favors without them knowing, just to restore the equilibrium of the universe. You know,
Hmm.
I can remember the
Yeah.
names of the ones that I didn't know they had done me favors, and I only found out after the fact, like
Oh,
years later.
wow. How'd you find out? Did somebody tell you, or did you
Yeah,
did like
I
the
ran
like
into the
open it up, or what?
yeah, one of the smarter guys that, had worked for me, um, I met him in New York City. He happened to be in New York, and he and he knew I was out there. So he said, "Hey, let's get a cup of coffee." So we wound up getting a cup of coffee, and he explained to me everything I didn't know. And I said, "Why didn't you tell me back then?" And he goes, "If I had told you back then, it would have been considered a great insult that I was telling you this because you didn't know. And I didn't want you to feel insulted." And I said, "Oh, Derek, oh my God, I wish you'd told me." And he goes, "Yeah, but you don't understand it. It would have been, if I told you, it could have leaked out." So I'll give you an example of what he would say. He said, "You have to understand that compliments over there are very hard to come by. If somebody compliments you too easily, which by the way is California culture, to be very supportive and complimentary and, oh, I love that jacket. Oh, wow, you're really good at this. To do that over there is considered very cringeworthy because in that culture, and that meant you were sucking up, but you were sucking up so obviously that only an idiot would interpret it as anything but you sucking up. Okay. So, in other words, they're very reluctant to tell you, that was a good thing or you did a good job here. So they're never going to say that. But if anybody does, and there was occasionally somebody who would be very supportive, I, as a Californian, would interpret this as somebody trying to help me and trying to be helpful and an ally. And they would just grit their teeth because they knew those people were just ass kissers and had no respect for me. And so as he's describing this to me over coffee in Manhattan, I'm going, "Oh no, all of the people that I thought liked me hated me, and some of the people that I thought hated me actually liked me. Oh no. Oh no." And then there were quite a few people who I knew hated me, and that was for real.
Of course.
It was
That's
so
funny.
obvious. Yeah.
That's funny. So how did you get your confidence back? I think we've all had our confidence shaken. I mean, what did you do to get it back? Did it like come back all at once, or did it just slowly, like one day you're like, oh yeah, now I got it?
Slowly slowly like getting rid of a hangover. Like it
Yeah.
was the same experience, like getting rid of a
Mm.
hangover. Just one day you're like, "Okay, well, I'm okay now." Um, but it's the shakes and the headache and the nausea, and then eventually, okay, I feel good again. I'm ready to have another vodka.
There you go. Good. Yeah. Ready to get kicked again, right?
Yeah, yeah. I, humility. You could say that you tempt fate every time you claim you're good at something. You just, you just know the universe is waiting there to slap you. Um, I'm not sure that's true. I think that a degree of feeling good about something is actually a positive thing. And um, but within limits. Are you familiar with the? You probably heard of the Oracle of Delphi,
Sure.
but I was not really aware what a major part of the culture this thing was. And on the site of the Oracle of Delphi, there is a very big temple built, and on that temple there was an entrance to the oracle, and it had three maxims. Now there were maxims all over the temple, but the three main maxims were everything in moderation, um, know thyself, and the third one is sort of in dispute because the translation is rugged, but it essentially the third one is um, being certain is ruin. Like anytime you
Mm.
feel sure of something, that is going to be your undoing. Don't be so sure. And that everything in moderation, I think, is the underestimated of the three. Right?
Yeah.
Allow yourself some confidence, but only so much. Allow yourself some humility, but only so much. Um, you must forgive yourself for some of your sins, but only so much. And generosity, even generosity, can be too much.
Yeah. Even bacon. Too much bacon, we're all in trouble.
Yeah, man.
So, yeah. So you mentioned earlier here that once you know the formula, you know what works, and you share it. So,
Yeah.
what's the formula, Neil? You got to tell me. I need to hear it.
So I'll start with a couple of Here's the first one. You must know where you're going. That is, know your destination before you begin. So, in a story, how is this going to resolve? What is the feeling I want to leave people with? And what is the lesson I'm hoping to impart? And by the way, generally speaking, my stories, the lesson will have been hard won. That is, it's some error I've committed or some oversight that I've made. And what's beautiful about that is that it's true. Uh, if you can admit to a foible, what's nice about that is that everybody goes, yeah, been there, and they'll recognize in your struggle their struggle, and it instead of being the audience, then the two of you, instead of storyteller and audience, it's like the two of us are on this journey together. Like I'm sharing this for a reason. I'm not sharing this to be a big shot. I'm sharing this because I want to help if I can. And if I could only tell one story, and I haven't done this yet, if I could tell only one story and it got received in the spirit it's meant, we're not alone, man. We're not alone. And you're not supposed to be alone. And this lone wolf culture, I'm the big man, I'm the big shot, only I can do this. It's like, no, God, you're not, that's not going to make you happy. And I'll tell you why it's not going to make you happy, because you're not making anybody else happy. So the great stories start with an intention that this is how I'm going to make you feel, and this is what I hope this will teach you, because I learned this the hard way. So intention is a big part of it, and then another part of it is just like we are all on a journey. Journeys have ups and downs. If it was all up, it wouldn't be any fun. You have to have those down moments. You have to have those setbacks. Joe Rogan has this he's got a series of things that he's said that are quite brilliant and some that aren't so brilliant. But I think one of the smartest things I ever heard out of his mouth was that he said, look, I like a story where the story begins with somebody at their absolute lowest ebb. And I love to watch them climb out of that abyss. That's a great story. Somebody who had some great tragedy befall them, but they didn't let that stop them. Or somebody who had polio and they didn't let that stop them. Or I personally know just a wonderful, wonderful cat. This guy, Barry Shore, this son of a gun, he is the most infectiously joyful person. And he was a quadriplegic who has now just finished swimming his 8,000th mile because he's a swimmer now. That's how he has gotten his mobility. His story starts in a very dark place, and it emerges into the sunlight. And not only does it emerge into the sunlight, now he is the sunlight. So any story must have a rhythm to it, a wave form. It can't be all sweetness and light. It has to go dark, and then it has to improve. And in that spirit, when you're delivering a story, your voice should likewise allow itself to get excited and be upset and be soft and then be loud. And in other words, I don't think people give themselves permission enough to be reading a storybook to a kid. Do you know what I mean? When they're talking to
Yeah.
adult audiences, they don't let themselves tell stories like they would to a child, which is actually how they really ought to be told. Don't you think? Right? There was a wonderful Swedish movie, or maybe it was Danish. I think it was a wonderful Swedish movie called A Man Called Ove. And it's been remade with Tom Hanks now, A Man Called Otto. And in this movie, this awful curmudgeon, these two little girls want him to read a story for them. And he starts out doing it, okay, there is a bear and the bear does this. And they go, no, you have to do the voices. Oh, all right. I am the bear. It's okay. Well, so he's in the middle of this seemingly embarrassing thing, but he's so into it that when a clown comes up and tries to get the children's attention, he's like, piss off. I'm in the middle of this story. In other words, he's starting to enjoy it. And I think that's I think if you start out with a sense of that you're hoping to do something on behalf of your audience, you're hoping to bring them some joy or reassurance, you'll enjoy it. Let me go back to that Procter and Gamble ad, that wonderful Olympics ad. Let me ask you a serious question. Do you think they enjoyed making that commercial?
Absolutely.
Are you kidding? Of course they would. They enjoyed.
Absolutely.
Commercials are largely they're very effortful. They take tremendous amounts of energy. I mean, the money, of course, but it's just man hours like you can't believe, and you're sweating over color correction and sound design and for all the sex appeal. It's hard work when you're on a shoot. It's oh my God, you're burning $10,000 a minute, or more, and you're just going, God, we got to get this shot. It's high stress and it's high effort, and you gotta have faith that the place kicker's gonna make this shot, because the director's gonna do it, right? The DP's gonna be on it, and the sound, and nobody turned on a leaf blower in the middle of the good take. I mean, it's high stress, baby. But when you're shooting something like that, everybody's a true believer. Man, everybody's got religion. And at that point, what you throw me a leaf blower and it's like, hey man, could you be quiet? Instead of, I'll effing kill you if you don't turn that thing off. And um, that, young advertising creatives, they strain to make the work great. They pour heart and soul and energy and passion into these things. And it's soul destroying when a client just wants it to be about $99 a month. And the reason is that they have an instinct that when you produce it, it's going to take a crap ton of effort and it's going to cost a fortune. Why would you waste your time on something nobody cares about that does no good for anybody? And it's just as much effort to do something that everybody hates as it is to do something everybody loves. And
Wow.
I forgot where we started on that. Oh yeah, it was back to like what
No,
makes a good story.
yeah, no, but that point about effort, I think, is so important, and that's a great lesson for all of us, right? It takes as much effort to suck as it does to be great. So why not
It's
be great?
right. It takes more effort when you really think about it because not only are you doing the effort, but you have to deal with the stomach acid that's eating away at your vocal cords while you're doing it. Um, Phil, if you've been on set and things aren't going right, wow, people are tense. And when people are tense, they get snippy. And then when they get snippy, they say stuff they shouldn't say. And then that amps the problems. And, as opposed to, we all believe in this. This is going to be great. I saw this marvelous story that Russell Crowe told about when they were shooting Gladiator with, was it Ridley Scott or Tony Scott? I can't remember who
Ridley, I
shot.
think it was Ridley. I think
Okay,
you're right.
so let's just assume it's Ridley Scott. And he describes this. If you don't mind, I'm just going to replay slightly his story. And he says, I was there in my all of my Roman legionnaires thing. I had a full suit of armor on, and I had my big fur-lined cape, and I'm on set, and it's thousands, hundreds of extras, and we're there in the trees and Germanicus, and blah blah, and they've got the dogs of war and everything. And Ridley comes up to me and says, "All right, now in this scene, it's going to be very in tight, and what I want you to do is I want you to be absorbed by the battlefield, but then out of the corner of your eye, you see a small bird and it catches your attention. And there's something about that bird that you find very sweet. And it brings an ever so slight smile to your face. And it makes you wistful. And then you follow its flight. And as you watch the bird fly away, it suddenly restores you to the battlefield and you remember where you are. And your expression changes to one of determination. All right? So Russell goes, okay. So he goes, okay, and action. And he says, and I did exactly what he wanted me to do. And I had a little bit of this and I did that and I looked over here. And at the end, I gave it a little extra flavor, just little things that I thought might make it work. And Ridley Scott yells, cut. And he walks over to me and he goes, you and I are going to be great, mate. We're going to do great things. And I thought, what a marvelous description of when it works.
Wow.
It just I thought, "Oh, how effing awesome is it to be even a production assistant or a gaffer or somebody who's pulling the cables because you were there and you saw the artwork and you know how hard this is and they're throwing strikes." You know what I mean? It's just really exciting to be on a production where you go, I know this much. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. But if you start with silk, maybe we'll get there."
There you go. Wow. Wow. That's so, yeah, that's just so beautiful and yet so hard to replicate, right? That's not, I sure don't have the talent to replicate that. That's so fascinating to
Oh, I'm
hear,
not doing it justice. You can find it on YouTube. It's such a
No, but
brilliant one.
still though, but still, right? I mean, I can see that and I can imagine, right, having seen the movie and
Yeah.
understanding,
Yeah.
all of
If you
that. It's like, wow.
I just wanna say also, Phil, when you do see Gladiator, Gladiator is a big spectacle, and it's a marvelous piece of art, and anybody who has ever tried to either write a screenplay or produce a movie or do anything of any, significant work in film, they all understand the struggle to create something good, just good. Just sensical, to say nothing of good. And then you go to something like Gladiator that stands the test of time, and even though it is a spectacle, it is moments like I just described that give it the, um that earn it the respect that it deserves. Imagine having to have the stamina as a director to put that kind of energy into a single camera shot, into a single shot where I need you to do this and this and this. You've got all these people around and it's chaos and everybody's yelling and they're trying to move this over there and make sure it's light. And you got to worry about how long is the sun going to be in the position it's in. You've got 15 minutes and we got to snap off 3 tries at this. Okay, so there's all that tension. And yet he's able in that moment to go, Russell, this is what I'm looking for. And it's right. You can just see it. You can just see him
Yeah.
saying, he can't yell it through a megaphone. He can't do it from 15 feet. It's got to be right up like this. And I'm going to ignore all of this stuff going on. And I'm going to have faith that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. But you and I are going to talk about what we both know is where the rubber meets the road. It is the tiny little micro expressions on your face that will convince them that you really were that you really were this man, not play acting. Right? They've got to know it's you. That's where you earn that this really happened is by you're not chewing the scenery. It's tiny flickers of expression. I'm going off on this. I shouldn't. We should talk about the real reason that
No, that
which is
is the real reason we're here, is to give folks some hope about storytelling and about life and about finding what's right. Because a lot of people could certainly see that, you know, m- often movies, we see the things that go wrong. I mean, if we look on TikTok and Instagram, we see people that they show the foibles. I mean, my wife laughs her butt
yeah,
off when people like smash into cars and, trip over themselves. And I'm like, wow, that's unfortunate. So, yeah. So with that, right? Let's get a little bit back to finding what's right. I mean,
yeah,
how do we look for that, Neil? How do we find that? I mean, when
yeah,
there's so much chaos around us. I mean, we're Ridley Scott in our own lives here.
yeah. That's a
There's
good
so
point.
much noise all over. How do
Yeah.
we how do we slow it down and find that?
Okay. So I want to offer a tip. It's it's like this. The most valuable real estate in any story that you tell is the first 10 seconds. And when I see somebody on YouTube or on TikTok or any other medium where there is a story to be told, like let's say it's a big business meeting and you have just stood up to speak, you don't blow the first 10 seconds on something silly like how's everybody doing or what's up or some other throat clearing. Uh, and so here is this is something that the veterans know only too well. A strong beginning, an intriguing start gives you you've got them for 2 minutes. They'll hang on for 2 minutes if you can just start strong. But if you don't, they're already looking at their watches and reaching for their phones. If you do too much declension, at the beginning, how's everybody doing? I'm so excited to be here. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay. So how do you know how to? So what this leads to is this: if you're going to capitalize on the first 10 seconds, the first 20 seconds, and you're going to hold their interest, and you're going to create, you're going to advance some kind of provocative thought, or you're going to start with some bold claim, or for example, I'll give you a couple of examples of strong beginnings. I, you know, you have me on because I am a storyteller, but I've seen some great ones, Phil, great ones. And one of them was this Portuguese guy that was a colleague of mine, or not Portuguese, he was Brazilian. And his name was Rodrigo. And Rodrigo used to walk into rooms and say stuff like, "This is going to be so great. You're going to," and I can't do a Portuguese accent. He goes, "This is going to be so great. When we get to the end, I'm going to ask you, was that great?" And you're going to say, "That was great." And so you're going, all right, well, that's one way to begin. Like, so he would do that in rooms full of salespeople. Now, let me ask you seriously, why would he do that in a room full of salespeople? Why is that a great beginning? You tell me.
Well, thinking about the salespeople that I know, chances are they're expecting it to be terrible. They're expecting it to be boring. So they want someone that, and they always have to bring the energy. So to have someone else give it to them
I hadn't
is
thought of
is
that.
quite a shock.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so
You tell me.
yeah, they're usually the ones that have to bring the energy. Okay, so that's a great observation. That's not what I was thinking, but that may be just as good as what I'm about to tell you. Rodrigo used to do stuff like that in rooms full of salespeople because he said, "I want them to start skeptical and end converted." And any room full of salespeople has two qualities. They're going to start with, "Oh yeah," like, they're going to start with, "Prove it, a-hole." Okay, that's the first thing. But he goes, "But nobody likes to be sold as much as a salesman." They want you to win secretly, but you got to earn it. And so he said, so he would say, "This is going to be great. When we get to the end, I'm going to ask you if this was great, and you're going to say that was great." Okay, so what he's doing is, when he finally gets to the end, and it always was great, by the way, it was always great because there were times when he would literally dance. I mean, he was just, you're talking about bringing the energy. This guy brought the energy, and he was so full of fun and spirit that even the ones that were skeptical at the beginning go, "Yeah, no, that was pretty good. That was pretty good." And so what happens is he's closed where he opened, and they have to grudgingly admit it was great. And then what happens is, and this is another thing that everybody needs to recognize, is the story isn't over just because the story's over. That's the beginning of the conversation. Because up to this point, it's been me doing the talking, but now you do the talking. Now we do the talking. So the story needs to end in a way where somebody wants to talk to you. Like, it's a natural thing for them to say, "Wow, that happened to me," or "That is fantastic." And like, imagine if you go back to the Procter and Gamble example. Okay, so we're all sitting around and we're watching the Winter Olympics, and then that ad comes on. And of all the things we've seen that day, that was the best one, right? All the sports, but this was the best moment, was that ad. And what do you think people do? You think people just stare at the TV and wait for the next ad? Or do they all turn to one another and go, "Did you see that? What do you think of that? Mom," they'll hug their mothers after that commercial. And they'll so in other words, a great story is really the beginning of a conversation. So, when you get up and you say something like, "How's everybody doing?" You're starting the conversation too early. Like, you've invited data problem, isn't it, my end? I guess it probably is. Um, so anyway, Phil, that my sense is you got to make sure that you protect the first 10 seconds of real estate with a strong idea. Now, how do you do that? You got to make sure you rehearse. You've got to make sure you know what you're going to say. You cannot be unsure. You have to do it enough times either tell it enough times or write it down and practice it enough times. When they push that button and it's go, you start. You don't wait. You start with a question or a statement. Like it would be like, start out and say, I would like to make the case that minor league baseball is vastly superior to the majors. Okay. First thing out of your mouth. Now they go, okay, this is going to be an editorial about why something with the word minor in it is superior to the product that says major. All right, you're good for 30 seconds. Keep going, right? And then once you've made a sort of opening gambit, then what you want to do is you want to bring them somewhere and paint a picture in such a way that they are not watching you, they are sitting next to you. So they must never feel like this is somebody talking about themselves as though they are a hero. This is somebody who is going to take me on a journey that sounds familiar and yet is new. So if I started with that business about, I'd like to make the case that minor league baseball is better than the majors. I took my kids to the minor league ball games near our home because it was $8 a ticket and every seat was close to the action. All right. So I'm not making any claims that I'm going to, that I went to the Super Bowl and, which at $8,000 a ticket, and I had to fly there. No, I'm talking about a minor league ballpark where the parking was free. And so now you're sitting next to me on the aluminum stands and we're watching this ball game go on with guys that can barely catch pop flies. Who they're going to need that jersey that they're wearing next year so they don't put any names on it because you ain't going to be here next year, man. So play the sport for all it's worth because it's limited time only. Well, when you paint them a picture of an environment where they can sit next to you and watch things unfold, then you've got them for as long as that story takes to reach its crescendo. I'll give you another example of a kind of thing. It's like, I'll start a story and I might say something like, people who do nothing but complain about how human beings are crap have never met the people that I've met. My brother-in-law is possibly the coolest man I've ever met. He's an engineer cool, which means that in the zombie apocalypse, you want to be in this guy's foxhole. And I'm going to be shooting actually a video tonight, Phil, that talks about my brother-in-law because this guy, as an engineer, his favorite thing in the universe is to fix things. He loves to fix things. You show him a problem, he'll drop whatever he's doing and he will fix that problem, whether it's financial or putting solar panels up on your rooftop or in this case, we were in rural Colorado at like one of those safety marts or whatever they call them, where they were at a filling station. And we ran into this carload of these 3 gals that were in their early 20s, and they had a flat. And my brother-in-law gets out of the car and he's about to help them. And then he just stops and looks at what they're doing. They haven't jacked the car up, but they're trying to pull the nuts off the wheel. Okay. So he's like, oh no, we were on our way to go to go to a driving range to hit golf balls. And instead of going to the driving range, we spent the next hour and a half, not just fixing these gals' car, but training them how to do it. And he built them tools. He said, I don't know if you've got enough arm strength to work this thing. So we're going to cobble together a kind of lever where you can attach this on. And then you've got a fulcrum, and he was explaining to these gals. And it was very instructive to me, Phil, to watch who was paying attention.
Yeah.
And anyway, the only reason I go into that is just that it's quite easy to be there in the Quickie Mart with me watching him do his work. It's not one where I'm the hero and I'm fixing the tire. I wish I had been, but when you're in Mike's presence, you just let him do everything. But I had to admire the way he's like, he just grabs the bull by the horns and like, yeah, we were on our way to the driving range. That's off the table, Neal. Not anymore. Now we're going to do the human race a big service. We're going to leave 3 young women better equipped to face the highway. And so just my way of saying that when you are telling a story, you want to create an environment that they can participate in with you. where they can see it and feel it and smell it. And in the spirit of improv, one of the things that Dan Aykroyd, the great actor from Saturday Night Live, what he used to do was, if somebody said, okay, we're going to improv that we're in a car together and we're on a road trip, he wouldn't be thinking, okay, we're in a car. He would be thinking, we're in a 1972 Dodge Dart and the right-hand mirror is missing. And the car has a tendency to overheat. Okay, so when he's got that in his mind, his gestures are going to betray small, they're going to betray small idiosyncrasies that create a reality that you're not even conscious of. You're not conscious of why you find it realistic. It's like that thing with Russell Crowe. The tiniest flicker of seeing the bird go, the fact that the bird's flight returns his vision to the battlefield and then he's back in the moment. These are very subtle things, but you notice them subconsciously. They persuade you subconsciously, and that's the best kind. You haven't been argued through logic into believing that he's a centurion, because you're never going to believe that if you really think it through. You're only going to feel that it's true. So
Yeah.
small details in a story depend on you imagining yourself there.
Yeah. And depend on the storyteller helping us be transported there
Yeah, the
as
storyteller's got to
well.
rehearse it enough times and say it enough times when they can start to when they know where it's going in a kind of rhythmic way. Timing is the stand-up comedian's great secret weapon. Um, they they wait just long enough to drop that punchline on you, or they will say things at a certain cadence and then they'll hurry up and then they'll slow down. And timing is a matter of rehearsing it, doing it over and over and deciding maybe a little faster, maybe a little slower. And for the benefit of anybody that is listening and cares, because we can watch ourselves on our phones now, it's usually a good idea to watch yourself telling a story to see how it plays. And I would highly recommend that. That's what I do.
Yeah. Wow. Great suggestion. Lots of stuff. Wow. Knowing your story before you begin, I think, is the big thing that I've taken away from you today. Thinking about that feeling, that lesson, that,
Yeah. What do you want
that
them to
that
feel? Where do you want them to
location.
wind up?
Yeah, I love that. Love that. So Neal, so much that we probably could continue to talk about here. I want to put your YouTube channel on there. It's Neal Foard, Foard. If you want to check him out there, he's on YouTube, he's on Instagram, which is where I found him. But Neal, if there's one more thing that you want to impart to folks that maybe give them a little bit of hope, help them find what's right, or help them get started telling better stories, what would it be?
Okay, wow, that's open-ended. Let's do this. The the most important thing for us all to remember when we're getting up in front of anybody else is you're there to help. Okay? The only reason they're having you stand up in front of the room is apparently you've got something valuable to communicate. And what we often do as salespeople or business professionals is we're coming at it from our goals and wishes. I'm here to do this to get the sale to win the commission so I can feed my family. Okay, no, you can't do that. You can't do that any more than Procter and Gamble needs to come on there and convince you that this soap will make your clothes 20% cleaner. No, that's about you. This has to be about your audience. What do they want? How can this help them? If you go in with the goal, I am just there to help, then the structure of everything that you're going to deliver, it changes. Its tonality changes. The end state changes. And I really, truly wish we had more time, Phil, because I've got a couple of great examples of the difference between somebody who really wants to help versus somebody who's self-interested and they're only telling somebody something so that they can gain from it. That difference in motive is profound, and people can smell it on you when you're there to help. And that more than anything is, if you can internalize that, you've just given yourself 50 yards on a football field.
Wow. Wow. Being there to help. Well,
Yeah,
Neal, we'll have to do this another time and
I look
talk more
forward to it.
about that because that
Hope
is
so.
Powerful stuff, man. Oh, you don't have to hope so. We're gonna set this up when we're done here.
Oh,
So
right on.
reminding folks, right, that they're just here to help, making that be our motivation instead of getting, as we like to call in sales, commission breath, being there to serve, right, instead of there to sell.
Yeah.
Super big stuff. So I super appreciate that, Neal. Neal, you're fantastic. I love the way you tell stories. I love our conversation today. Your
Thank you, Phil.
videos are fantastic.
Back at you.
Absolutely. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks,
All right,
man.
man.